Hello and welcome to the Schola Progenium. Today I'm going to be talking to you about an interesting and cool new character that I'm going to be adding to my army. Now this is a unique special character that I've come up with that I'm calling Sergeant X. What he actually is in game terms is an Eversor assassin. Now I was watching a battle report. Obviously I'm aware of Eversor assassins, and I've even come across one in a tournament, but that was a couple of years ago perhaps. So, they've changed in the rules and since then, and I sort of hadn't really had my eye on them, to be honest. But I saw one in a battle report recently, and I thought, oh, he looks really cool, he's really interesting, and I noticed that he had a 3d6 charge, and I thought, I love my 3d6 charge with my Death Company, and he seems, like a good addition to the Blood Angels forces, because, having two 3d6 charges going off in a turn, you always wish you could do that twice. So why not have a character that can do that? And I thought, instead of building or buying an Eversor assassin, what I would do is I would just make a model that looks like a Blood Angels character, make a little bit of fluff up about him, but use him, pay the command point and 85 points in reserve points in game terms when I'm using him, and he is just simply an Eversor assassin, but with that Blood Angels theme, which is cool because I like to play pure Blood Angels. Now, I've converted him, so I thought before I paint him up, and I'll paint him up in a sec whilst I talk to you a bit more about his tactics and that kind of thing, but I thought I'd talk you through the different bits that I've used to convert this guy up. So the main torso and legs are just simply an Assault Marine. Now, I had spare fancy Blood Angels torsos, but I thought, I'll keep this guy as just like a simple Sergeant or something like that. Just a standard Blood Angel, not an actual character like a Captain or a Lieutenant, because, he wouldn't give people rerolls and that kind of thing, it wouldn't work. So I made him a standard Blood Angel. I just used an Assault Marine there. And then I got some grenades and pouches just from my bits box, and I stuck those on his, what would be his jetpack straps. But I thought, if he's fighting on his own and he's sort of a little bit of a special character who could almost be like a special ops guy, and he's just, that torso looks really nice with those grenades attached to it. Then I gave him a standard Blood Angels backpack. I think that might be from the Death Company box. It looks like it's got a Death Company symbol on the back there with the cross and the skull. And also I gave him a melter bomb, because Eversor assassins come with melter bombs. His little claw, which in game terms is AP -1, strength +1, reroll all failed wounds, is actually from the Tartarus Terminator box set. It's a lightning claw. So it actually comes with 4 claws, so I just split it down the middle to give him 2 claws, and I just got a little bit of wire. Can't go wrong with a little bit of wire in your bits box, and I just twisted that up and attached it to one of those sort of little ports, almost like a power port or something like that, power jack on the side of his backpack. I think that looks pretty cool. And then I thought, let's make him look badass. So set him apart from a normal Blood Angel Assault Marine. So I thought, we'll give him no sleeves. Me and Sam, when we're playing our games, we always love a bit of no sleeves characters, because, when you roll your sleeves up, you're ready to do some action, take some heads. So I gave him arms, and I think they're from actually the Chaos Marauder box, and then he's just got a little hand, and that sword does come as a left-handed sword, but I've just chopped it and rejigged it and stuck it on. And I know it's not the neatest fit, and I could use green stuff and all that, but when you're playing on the battlefield, you won't notice, and it won't matter. So I can't be bothered. I'm not going to bother. I don't think you need to be that much of a perfectionist when you're doing your models. They just need to look cool and badass, and look good when they're painted up from when you've got them on the tabletop. So yeah, not really too bothered about that. The neat attachment, same for the other hand. Now in his other hand, the Eversor assassin has a machine pistol that is 4 shots, and it's strength 4, AP -1. And what I've given this guy here is a Scutari machine pistol from the Ruststalker box set. And my mate Sam just gave me that because I asked him. I said, I'm making an Eversor assassin conversion. Do you have any spare machine pistol parts? And he said, yeah, no problem. Gave me that guy, and that's often the way with character when you're customizing characters. You'll have your friends, you can give them bits. I give Sam bits all the time for his modelling. He gives me bits. We don't keep a track of it. It's just the way it is. I think, in the fluff, I'll say, I've got a storyline for him, and obviously that's a metal hand, so it's pretty cool. He's got a metal hand. Now, we know the Blood Angels, they love finely crafting items and their own war gear and that kind of thing. So I can see him having, finely crafted himself like an automatic, fast-firing, armor-piercing bolt pistol of some sort. So he's made himself that, and he's probably had his hand made by one of his Blood Angel brothers, or he's made it himself to replace a lost hand. So here he is, fully painted up, Sergeant Ix. Now, I've not done a perfect job on him. He's ready for battle, and I'm pretty pleased. I've painted a lot of Blood Angels in my time, and I'm kind of know what level of quality I'm satisfied with when they're sat on the table, what I'll be happy with, and this is that. So I was missing white. My white had dried out, surprisingly or unsurprisingly, and therefore I haven't quite been able to finish his purity seal. Also meant I had to do his power blades in a different technique to what I would normally do, because normally I paint them white and then I use Nihilac oxide in layers to make them look really cool, but in this case I had to use different paints to do those blades. So they're the only thing I'm not really happy with on him, but I think otherwise he looks really cool and very badass, and that's the aim of the game here. So first of all, I'll just very briefly go through the paints that I used to paint him, and I'll go through the fluff that I've come up with very briefly, and then what I'll do is I will talk you through why I think he is just an absolutely perfect Blood Angels asset. An Eversor Assassin is a mini Blood Angel. It's like a mini Death Company character of some description, and he ties in really, really well with other Blood Angels units and other Blood Angels tactics. So I'll talk you through that and why I think he is the perfect Blood Angels character, and why I've decided to make a little Blood Angels character version of an Eversor Assassin. So paints-wise, the flesh was simply Kislev flesh, and I've just put Reekland flesh shade on there as a wash. There's his pouch, and the silencer on his gun is in Abaddon black. The metals that I used for certain details was lead belcher, and for the bronze details and the brass details, Sycorax bronze. And then the washes that I used over those were Norn oil over the whole guy, and Agrax Earthshade over just the bronze bits, just to give it that sort of bronze look. And then the power sword was done with, I can never pronounce these two blue colours, Baharoth blue and Nihilac oxide as a wash. That's one of my favourites. If you want to do power weapons really quickly and simply, paint the blade white and then layer Nihilac oxide over it. It looks great. It's really easy to do. You can pull it off first time nicely, and yeah, just really easy technique that comes off great, but I haven't unfortunately been able to do it with Sergeant Ix. And then for the power cables, that's obviously black, and then I've used Uriel or Iriel yellow, and then his hair is Avalanche Sunset. So it's always good, to have a couple of different shades of different paints, just to make sure your model looks nice. Just adds that little easy, simple, extra level of detail by having two different shades of the same colour on there. It's an easy technique. If you want to get your models quickly onto the table looking, good, looking passable at least. And I know there's a lot of people out there who probably put a lot more time into this guy, but for me, he's good to go. Oh, and one other thing I should mention, I'm not sure I did, Reekland Flesh Shade on the face, layered in with Nuln Oil and Agrax Earthshade around the eyes and mouth region, just to make it a little bit darker. I never bothered to paint the eyes or the fangs with these guys, because I just end up making a mess, so I just don't bother. I think they look good just with a few different washes on the face, just to bring out the detail. So, who is Sergeant Ix? Well, what I've decided is, after the assault on Baal by the 3rd Splinter Fleet of, I think it was High Fleet Behemoth, but I can't remember exactly, the Blood Angels' forces were obviously destroyed. Now, they spent a bit of time, as we know from the lore, rebuilding their forces, but of course, they had to still be helping out Imperial forces and, sending troops to support in battles, because that was a time of great strife for the Imperium with the Great Rift and all of that. So they found themselves spread very thinly, and Sergeant Ix found himself one day leading a company of PDF units defending a planet against the orcs. And as he was about to lead a counter-assault against the orc lines, an artillery barrage came in and flattened the building he was in, and killing most of the men around him. He sort of came to conscious moments later with sirens blaring, from his armour. His armour was damaged severely, and he found that his left hand was just a bloody stump where a bit of masonry had just crushed it off. So he felt at this point under great strife, and the turmoil of the black rage started welling up inside him. He started seeing death visions of Sanguinius. So tearing off his damaged armour plates, he pulled out his power sword and charged towards the orc lines. But just as the moment where the black rage was fully overcoming his mind, orc weird boy sent a blast of warp energy or psychic energy, and it hit him square in the chest and knocked him off his feet. But instead of killing him, and instead of the black rage overtaking him entirely, instead the maelstrom of energy coming from the black rage in his psyche absorbed that power from the weird boy, and allowed him to almost in effect dilute the black rage so that he could still keep a semblance of his mind and still sort of know what was going on. But the black rage was infused inside him, and the fury of Sanguinius himself is infused within him. So he is an absolutely furious combat character, and that's sort of the fluff that explains why he's so good in combat, and why this simple sergeant is, effectively because he's as powerful as an Eversor assassin. So that's the fluff behind him. I just thought I'd come up with a little bit of cool fluff just to tie in with the parts on the model, and sort of tie in with the rules that I'll be using and why he's so powerful. Because he does need a sort of explanation for why he gets extra attacks on the charge and that kind of thing. It's always nice to come up with a little bit of lore for your special characters, because then when they do more feats on the tabletop, that just gets added to their history, and your sort of relationship with your models builds and your force builds over time. So, enough of that, enough of the paint and enough of the fluff. Let's get on with some rules right now. So why is the Eversor Assassin the perfect Blood Angels character? Well, let's have a look at his stat line. So he's movement 7, which means he can run in, run around the back lines and run around in combat chopping people up. But he also consolidates 6 inches, which is great. He can really get around amongst the enemy forces, chopping into them. He's got weapon skill 2, ballistic skill 2, which means that he's always hitting on 2s generally. And he's strength 4, toughness 4, and leadership 9, which makes him just like a Blood Angels character. Now, he has just a 6 up save, and that represents, I guess, the lack of armour, the fact that he's got no sleeves and no helmet on. But he does have a 4 up invulnerable save, which is really, really good. Now, the 4 up invulnerable save is kind of like a captain at the end of the day. So, you're always going to be saving on a 4 up, so he is at threat against just general Daka. The best way to get rid of him, I reckon, is to just hose him down, make him take a load of 4 up saves. However, he can have some resilience, because there's 2 specific stratagems that can be taken with this guy. Now, one is called Stim Overload. Now, what that means is that you can pay 2 command points to fight again at the end of the battle round, just like Honour the Chapter. Now, as you can imagine, this is really good because you can't use Honour the Chapter twice in one phase, because it's, a stratagem. But if you have this guy in there as a supplementary Blood Angels character, then you can Honour the Chapter with 1 unit, maybe, Captain, Terminators, whatever, it doesn't matter. And then you can also Stim Overload with this guy for 2 command points to get that extra fight twice. You're fighting twice with 2 units, and that is, it's all about maintaining the momentum and just hacking apart your opponents and tearing through them in close combat. And that's really going to help your whole army. So he's going to tie in really nicely with your assault. Now, he also has another specific stratagem called Hypermetabolism. Now, hypermetabolism is interesting because what it does is it gives him a 4 up, feel no pain. You have to decide to use it at the beginning of the phase, and it gives him a 4 up, feel no pain for that phase. Now, you've got to be careful. Your opponent could really bait you in, firing lots of small bits or shooting at him with a small unit and then charging in and trying to bait you into use that feel no pain in several phases. But it's really interesting because it just means you can, at the beginning of a phase, if you're charging in against someone and he's on one wound and you think, I want to live and make this charge, this final hurrah, you can spend that command point, give him a 4-up feel no pain. Then in the next phase, you can just spend that stratagem again and give him 4-up feel no pain in the combat phase. So it's an expensive stratagem to keep giving him the feel no pain, but it is certainly very useful because with 6 wounds and 6 attacks, but 6 wounds and a 4-up invuln and a 4-up feel no pain, this guy can go far. He can really live and be very resilient, just like our other Blood Angels characters. So he's, fights and feels like a Space Marine apart from the lack of the 3-up save. But he feels very much like a Space Marine character because you're often, with the kind of stuff your opponent shoots at Space Marine characters, you're often on that 4-up invuln unless you've got a Storm Shield. So, he feels like a Space Marine Blood Angels character, and furthermore, he gets +2 attacks on the charge. So again, if you've got your Death Company there, it's almost, that's why I've gone for the fluff of the fact that he's sort of got the Black Rage, but he's managed to sort of temper it and keep it at bay in his mind with that blast of energy from the Weird Boy in the Orc lines, because he can have a feel no pain like Death Company, in fact a 4-up feel no pain if he needs it, but only briefly here and there when he channels the Black Rage to keep him alive. And he also can channel that Black Rage to give him 2, because he gets 2 extra attacks on the charge. So 8 attacks on the charge is absolutely crazy. Not only that, but he really does feel like a Blood Angels character, because he actually, if you remember the old Blood Talons from I think the 6th or possibly even 5th edition Codex, the Blood Talons, every kill that you got allowed you to strike again on the Dreadnought, which was absolutely incredible. Now this guy sort of brings that back to us, because for every kill that he gets in close combat, he can immediately make another strike. So against guard equivalents, you will probably kill 5 in your first sort of wave of hacking them apart, and then that'll generate 5 more attacks. Now you can't generate more attacks off those attacks, it doesn't go on forever, but you probably kill 3 more. Now with those guys being leadership 7, that's a squad wipe on 10 guardsmen straight away, and considering the fact that his gun is strength 4, AP -1, so even if those guardsmen are in cover and he's charging into cover, they won't get the benefit of that cover save, and it re-rolls failed wounds, that gun, so just like his lightning claw, he's always re-rolling those failed wounds. So he'll probably shoot up and kill a couple of guardsmen, then charge in and kill the other 8. So this guy's designed to kill 10 guard equivalent models just on his own, single-handedly, per turn, so he can make sure he can get through and get those assassinations off. And likewise, he'll go through 5 Space Marines very happily. So let's look at a bit more detail at his close combat weapons and a couple more ideas of specific tactics we can use him with. So his Power Claw gives him re-roll to wounds, but it's only AP -1, but it does give him +1 strength. Now that again makes him feel like a Blood Angel, because when you're fighting against toughness for opponents, you've got +1 to your strength, which means you're wounding them on 3s. So against Chaos Marines, and Necrons, that kind of thing, he really does feel like a Blood Angel. You forget that he's actually an Eversor assassin, because he's got that little bonus to wound ability, and the reroll wounds is great. So he's got reroll wounds on his pistol and on his little lightning claw. Now the Power Sword is actually more useful than I imagined it would be. I played a couple of games with him when he was unpainted, just against Sam, a couple of 750 point games where I had him in there just to try him out before I did this video. And his Power Sword is actually really useful, because sometimes you just need that AP -3, and there's no two ways about it. If you're hunting down characters or stuff with invuln saves and you don't really care about AP minus, then this Lightning Claw, 8 attacks, hitting on 2s, wounding on 3s, re-rolling is really, really nice. And losing that extra strength on the Power Sword, you do feel it, but against certain opponents you need it, because if they're high armor save but no invuln, then that Power Sword can really just, when your opponent doesn't have saves, it's really nice, as we all know. So, he does feel even more like a Blood Angel when we look into his weaponry in more detail. So let's have a look at a couple of tactics that we can use with him. Well, the first thing that you need to know is how you get this guy in your army. Now, you can spend 2 command points and set aside 85 points at the beginning of the game to take any assassin of your choice, and you pick it in the deployment phase, which means that you don't have to, you can customize the assassin to your list, but of course I haven't built the other assassins, I've only built this guy. So because of that, I will actually only have to spend 1 command point, because I will just take him as an auxiliary detachment, just a single vanguard choice, which costs 1 command point to do that. And you can do that for heavy support, fast attack, you know, it doesn't matter, whatever. So he will be a separate detachment, assassins detachment. So I can only have 3 detachments in my army, and one of those detachments is costing me a command point. So he is a little pricey, or I can spend 2 command points to have any assassin of my choice, which, you know, is something that you need to know, because maybe you want to have an option for the different assassins in your army. Now, why am I sort of so enamored with this guy? Why is he so good? Well, he's a character, but when he deep strikes in, he has a 3d6 charge, which is the same as when we spend 2 command points to do that with a jetpack unit. So he's just a force multiplier, because you're going to be able to get in, you know, 74% of the time is the maths. But if you've got a command point, you can, you know, re-roll one of your low dice. If you get a 1 or something like that, it ruins the charge. So, you know, between 2 units both getting a 3d6 charge, it's going to make sure that first charge just goes in absolutely beautifully when you drop in your units at the first in the second turn. One thing I should mention before we go in, or a couple of things I should mention before I go any further into the specific tactics and ideas I've got for this guy, is that the stim overload actually costs a little extra than just the 2 command points, because you have to roll a dice. On a d6 on a 4-up, he takes a mortal wound, and he cannot use his 4-up Feel No Pain against mortal wounds, so he is vulnerable in the psychic phase. And I believe that probably he can't use the 4-up against mortal wounds because it stops him from avoiding his own stim overload on his Feel No Pain. So, you know, it's a risk, but it can play to your advantage, because one of the tactics I would have with this guy is I would sort of, if he's taken down to just 1 wound, if your opponent just fails to kill him, and you've got those 2 command points, you can spend those 2 command points, and then he can fight again and deck 1 unit, and then, or spread his attacks and get a couple of units down to 1 wound, maybe a couple of characters or something like that. And then when he dies, he actually explodes on a 4-up, and he only damages units that are opposing units. So your guys are safe from the explosion. I don't know why, but that's just the way it is. But he explodes because of all the chemicals flowing through his veins. So on a 4-up, after he takes that mortal wound, if you get the 4-up, and if you get a 1 to 3 and take the mortal wound, then a 4-up you can explode, and you'll do D3 mortal wounds to every opponent within, I believe it's 6 inches, which is really good. So when he dies, or it might only be 3 inches, so when he dies, he does have that final little explosion, which is really tasty. Now, because he's got a 6-inch consolidate, one of the other tactics I see myself using with this guy is to kill off a screen of infantry and then consolidate up to 6 inches into a tank. Now, that's plenty of room. Generally, you know, your opponent might be clever and have his tanks 4 inches behind his infantry screen, so you can't declare against both units and then consolidate and fight again at the end of the fight phase with one of your units for Honour the Chapter, because that's a really good tactic. But if he's got his tank 4 inches away to avoid you being able to declare a charge against it, if you're a 9-inch charge away on deep strike, then this guy can still consolidate 6 inches into that tank and catch that tank and stop it from shooting in the opponent's turn, which is really good, because, you know, in an assault army, one of the things that can happen is you can charge in, you can deck a load of units, but then they've still got a decent fire support line, and you know, it pays a heavy, you pay a heavy price, and it takes a heavy toll on your assault units in the opponent's next turn. So every unit that you can tie up is a bonus, and that's a standard Blood Angel's tactic, which again this guy can do almost even better than a Blood Angel. Now, because this guy's a character, he can't actually be targeted if there's units that are closer. So one of the things you can do is deep strike a load of units in and have this guy amongst them, but just, you know, a millimetre behind, so he's still a 9-inch charge away, but he is protected if you fail your charges. If everything just goes, you know, terribly, this guy will be alright because he's a character, so he wouldn't be able to be targeted. So he's safe if everything goes wrong, which is really important, because Blood Angels, you know, if you fail your charge, if you just get a seriously bad set of rolls and you fail your 3d6 charge, you fail all your 2d6 charges when you're doing your mass deep strike, or just mass assault or anything like that. If you fail and load a charge, you just have an unlucky turn, then this guy can stop you from totally losing your momentum, because you've still got this guy, combat character, 8 attacks on the charge, so the next turn this guy will go in there and he's almost guaranteed to get that charge off, so at least you'll get one guy in, you'll be able to soften up a priority target with this guy. So you can roll with this guy and make sure you get that charge in against a priority target, and then start rolling your charges which are less likely to go off. So he fits in really nicely, striking in with the rest of the units deep striking in amongst your other units. But you can also fight solo, because with his massive move of 7 inches, with his 6-inch consolidate, if your opponent's holding an objective or got some units, maybe a couple of units of infantry or a unit of infantry in a vehicle in cover, or on a flank or something like that, holding an objective just a little out of the way of the rest of their lines, then this guy can deep strike in. He's got a melter bomb as well, which is really good because it re-rolls wounds. Strength 8, AP -4, re-rolls wounds against vehicles, so we can crack units out of their transports and then hack them apart in the after charging them. So you can crack open the vehicle in the shooting phase and then charge the units inside and easily tear apart the amount of troops that will usually fit in your average transport. So instantly take over a flank of the game that would have been nicely secured by your opponent in their mind previously. So there's loads and loads of stuff you can do with this guy. He's really flexible. He just is an absolutely massive force multiplier for the Blood Angels, and he just does sort of everything that you want for a Blood Angels unit, but he's not a Blood Angel. But I've decided, to change that and to make Sergeant X. Now, one other thing I would just tell you about is the fact that two of the little sort of tricks of the trade with this guy is that when units pull out of combat with him, you can make a free shot. So I'd highly recommend, if it's so he's in combat with a character who doesn't quite manage to kill that character off, and they want to pull out because they think, oh, this guy will kill me off, and they're not confident of killing him first in their next turn. If they pull out, you can just chuck a melter bomb at them, because they're within 4 inches. Melter bomb's not close range, but you're within 4 inches, so you can chuck that melter bomb and possibly strength 8 AP -4 against something like a lieutenant, which doesn't even have an invuln save if he doesn't have a storm shield, or another similar buff character from there's loads of characters out there that don't have an invuln save. You will just kill that model off straight away. So he can just finish units off when they try and pull out as well. It's really hard to get away from him. And when he does kill a character, any character that he kills, if you spend 1 command point, so if you've got 1 left in your pool, you get 2 back for killing that character. So you get effectively 1 command point for every character that you kill, as long as you've got 1 in the bank already. And that's really useful, because this guy can start racking up command points for you. And Blood Angels, around turn 2 and 3, we will burn through almost all of our command points. And it can be horrible flying blind without any command points in the last couple of turns of the game. It can be really risky, and that is something that happens to us occasionally. But if you can just keep that 1 command point in the bank and get this guy in there, killing a couple of characters, and remember, you can chuck that melter bomb. If he gets close up to some characters after a 6-inch consolidate, you can, but not quite into combat with them, you can chuck that melter bomb at 1 character maybe that doesn't have an invuln save, d6 damage. If you've got a command point to re-roll it and he's hitting on a 2, you'll more than likely kill 1 character off, spend that command point, get 2 back, so you've gained a net command point. Then, in the fight phase, kill off another character, do that again because it's a separate phase, do that stratagem again, and get another free command point. So you can be racking up a couple of command points a turn for you, which is really useful. So all in all, this guy is just an absolutely brilliant, purebred Blood Angels character. So I hope this video has inspired you to make your own Sergeant X, or maybe come up with your own fluff, but to take an Eversor assassin in your Blood Angels lists. So thank you very much for your time. I hope you've been entertained. This has been the Schola Progenium. Goodbye.